Good morning and welcome back to Impactology Live for what is our third and unfortunately last day of our Festival of Impact. We have an amazing lineup of 11 speakers today, starting now with the brilliant Kirsten Forgione. Kirsten is a registered psychologist with a Master of Psychology and a Diploma of Positive Psychology and Wellbeing. Kirsten is intrigued by the study of human behaviour at work. She's committed to supporting organisations improve business performance and wellbeing through the assessment and development of individuals, teams and organisations. Kirsten is also the founder of MYNDLY and an adjunct lecturer in the MBA program at Deakin University, and we are so pleased to welcome Kirsten.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you, George. It is such a privilege to be with you this morning and to participate in such a wonderful event. And I'm here to talk about something that's very close to my heart and something that intrigues me, and it's my absolute passion. And that is why understanding the mind is critical for work and life. And as mentioned, my most recent venture is MYNDLY. I'm the co-founder of MYNDLY. It's brand new, but I would like to introduce MYNDLY to you today as I share with you some of these insights. So I'd like, if you haven't got these already, just to get a pen and paper, please. I've got two activities that I'd like to engage you with. So if you don't have these already, if you could just get yourself a pen and paper. Activity number 1, and this will make more sense as we go along, but I'd like you to list all the emotions you felt in the last 24 hours. So with that piece of paper, if you could list all the emotions you felt in the last 24 hours. I'm going to pause just for 30 seconds as you have a think about that. Now, with that list, I'd like you to categorize each of those emotions as either positive or negative. And you can do that with a symbol, so a plus or a minus, or maybe by the letters P and N. So if you just categorize those emotions as either positive or negative, so not good or bad or right and wrong, but just positive or negative. And then when you've done that, if you can express that as a ratio, so the number of positive emotions to the number of negative emotions. So that's number of positive to number of negative. And we'll talk through what you've got on your piece of paper shortly. So when I was invited to contribute to this conversation, I started to reflect on what impact means to me. And I went to the dictionary and I had a look at the definition, and it said coming into forcible contact with an object and having marked effect or influence. Now, to me, it just got me thinking that it's missing two key things. And the first is that we can have an impact through gestures that are both big and small. And Rosie mentioned that actually in her presentation yesterday, that sometimes the biggest things are the small things. And it got me thinking just about the small things. I think the big things are obvious, but if we think about the small things, just a smile from a stranger as you're walking down the street can absolutely change the course of your day, or a greeting from a barista as you're ordering your coffee. A card, maybe from a small child, a birthday card even just recognition from a client or a co-worker can just have a profound impact. But I think the second thing is that the definition doesn't really elaborate on what that marked effect or influence might be. And from my perspective, I think it's having an effect or influencing thinking, feeling, and or behavior. And I think this quote just captures it beautifully in terms of the impact that we can have through gestures, both big and small. And that is that we may never know how far reaching something we may feel, think, say, write, or do today will affect the lives of millions tomorrow. So it is just a pleasure to be part of this conversation. So at MYNDLY, we believe that we can all have an impact. And in fact, there is research that absolutely proves this. And I'd just like to share with you today some of that research. And it's research by Christakis and Fowler. And what they looked at was the spread of happiness within social networks and social groups. And what they found is that your emotional state may depend on the emotional experiences of people you don't even know, who are 2 to 3 degrees removed from you. And that effect isn't just fleeting. And I think this research is just incredibly powerful when we think about the impact that we can have just through our emotional state on people we know, but also on people that we do not know. So this is just a snippet from their research. But what they found is that if a person is happy, the likelihood that a friend will also be happy is increased by 15%. But at 2 degrees of separation, so that's a friend of a friend, the likelihood that if a person is happy, that likelihood is increased by 10%. And at 3 degrees, so that's a friend of a friend of a friend, that's increased by 6%. And what they found is that happiness spreads more robustly amongst social groups and social networks than sadness, which really goes against that saying that we're all familiar with, that misery breeds company. It's actually happiness breeds company. So really, really powerful research. So again, at Mindly, we believe we can have an impact on both ourselves and on other people. And one way of doing this is by understanding the mind and understanding how that works. So Mindly was born just recently in terms of finding a way to communicate or translate psychological science so we can each have an impact on ourselves and on other people. Now, Mindly is a word that we created. We hope that one day we will find it in the English dictionary. But when we think of it as an adverb, Mindly is a way of thinking, of feeling and doing that is characterized by a deep understanding of the mind. If we think of it as an adjective, it's about using that understanding of the mind to have a positive impact on ourselves and on those around us. So today I want to share with you some insights around what the psychological science says and how we can use that to understand the mind. So I'd like to talk to 3 concepts, and that's naive realism, negativity bias, and emotion regulation systems. Now, I could talk for hours, probably days, about this stuff, so I'm just going to give you a high-level understanding of each of these concepts. And let's start with naive realism. Now, this is an interesting one, and I think a very powerful one for us to know. And that is, as humans, we assume that we see the world the way it is and that everyone sees it the same way we do. So what this means is that each of us, because we're human, we have a bias to assume that what we see in the world and what we perceive is the way that it is. What that means is that we think it's objective data and we believe that it's free from bias. We also believe that everyone perceives and sees the same things that we do. And when we find out that they don't, we can get really confused by that and actually think that they might be ill-informed. So I think it's a really powerful bias to be aware of. And we believe that knowing this is absolutely critical for work and for life. So I just want to think about this. What is the impact if we assume at work and in life that we see the world the way it is and everyone else sees it the same way? So let's just think about that. If we think about just innovation as one example, if we go with this bias and this tendency and we make this assumption, are we missing the opportunity to innovate and to do things differently and to think outside the box? When we think about challenge and opportunity, are we missing the opportunity to have our viewpoint challenged with the objective of changing our worldview? When we think about diversity, are we missing the opportunity to harness that power of collective thought and diversity of thought? Are we missing the opportunity to work together in a really cohesive and collaborative way? Are we missing the opportunity if we don't spend time recognizing and understanding that people see the world differently? Are we missing the opportunity for really deep, meaningful connections with the people around us, both in a personal and professional context? And then when we think about conflict, are we missing the opportunity to resolve opposing viewpoints simply by understanding that people have completely different perceptions of the world? So I'd like to share 3 strategies with you and ways of being mindly. So again, just tapping back into what mindly means, it's about understanding the mind. So in this context, understanding naive realism and that bias that we carry, and using that understanding to have an impact on ourselves and on the people around us. So strategy number one, and I know it's quite an obvious one, but get curious. When we are in a state of curiosity, we are designed to learn. We are open. We are in a state of growth and discovery. We are receptive. We are present. We are mindful, and we are completely immersed and engaged either in the activity that we're doing or the experience that we're in, but also with the people that are around us. So that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is to check your confirmation bias. This is another human tendency or human bias, and that is that we will actively seek information that confirms our worldview or confirms our perspective. So we need to be really mindful or mindly of that. And the third is seek to be challenged. Now, this one can be quite confronting and a difficult one to do, but that's around actively finding information that goes against what you might believe or what you might think. So actively seeking an opposing viewpoint or a different perspective just to shift your understanding or thinking about things. The next thing I'd like to share is the negativity bias. So this is another hardwired tendency that as humans, we tend to focus more on the negative stuff more readily than the positive. So what this means is that our brains have been designed to actually scan the environment and pick up on everything that might be negative compared to things that might be positive. And that's because our brains were designed to detect threat. They were not designed to keep us happy. Now, this served our ancestors very well. It kept them safe, but it's not necessarily useful in the world that we live in today. So I think this is a really important one to be mindful of. It is critical to understand this when we think about work and when we think about life. So again, I ask the question, what is the impact at work and in life if we focus more on the negative than the positive? Think firstly about feedback. And we were talking about this just this week in our MBA class when we talked about some of the challenges that leaders are experiencing. And I think this is kind of broader than just leaders. But if you think about the times that you may have received negative feedback, and it's that 1% negative that you become totally consumed by and that really captures your focus, and it totally overrides the 99% positive feedback that you will likely receive. Think about the impact of that on your productivity if we spend time being consumed or ruminating on or dwelling on that 1% negative feedback. What does it mean for change? What does it mean for change as in personal change, but equally professional change? With this bias, are we more likely to focus on everything that might go wrong? What does it mean about challenge and opportunity? Are we likely to take on opportunity if we're focusing on all of the reasons that we might not succeed and not thinking about things that might go right or ways that we will succeed? And when we make decisions, are we making decisions out of fear? And we just think about things like risk aversion or loss aversion. And then finally, around relationships, again, both personal and professional. If we've got this bias, are we focusing and looking more for the negative stuff as opposed to the positive? And for some of us in relationships, are we just waiting to be disappointed? So some strategies again there around being mindly. So using this understanding of the negativity bias and using it to have an impact on yourself and on other people. The first strategy I'd like to share is to check your ratio. So if you look down on the piece of paper in front of you and you have a look at your ratio, again, that was the number of positive emotions to negative emotions. What the research is suggesting is that our ratio should be about 3-1. So 3 positive for every negative. There's 2 important things to point out here. And the first is that your positive emotions should outweigh your negative. So we would hopefully be experiencing more positive emotions than negative. But the number of the negative emotions is 1, not 0. We never want to be free of negative emotions. We don't want to ignore them. We don't want to suppress them. Negative emotions provide us with really important data and really important information for navigating and interacting in our world. Negative emotions are part of a rich human existence and a rich human experience. If you think back on some challenging experiences where you did experience negative emotions, you would likely have grown from that. Or when you look back on it, you may reflect in a more positive way. So we never want that number to be 0. The second is to practice gratitude. Now, this one I think is an interesting one because it can get a bad rap sometimes for being fluffy. And that's because I think we don't completely understand this negativity bias and the way that gratitude can actually circumvent our negativity bias. So there are different ways of practicing gratitude. One particular practice is 3 good things, where you write down 3 good things that you are grateful for. And you can do that and think about a week, you can think about a month, you can think about a year. To my knowledge, there is no research suggesting how frequently you should practice gratitude. It's about finding your rhythm. Now, that exercise is about finding 3 good things for which you are grateful. The other way of doing that is thinking about people for whom you are grateful. And we see the power of gratitude with that particular practice when people go out and we express that gratitude to someone. The other thing around practicing gratitude is writing it down. That's really key, putting pen to paper. So not just thinking about things we are grateful for, but actually writing it down. And the third strategy is around self-reflection. So that's when we give ourselves the space and the time to stop, to pause, and to notice what we're thinking or feeling, and have a think about when our negativity bias might be at play. Another thing with self-reflection, it's really important to write it down. You might be familiar with the fact that your thoughts and your feelings at times can seem really confusing and really ambiguous and sometimes arbitrary. And it's that process of writing it down that actually helps us to translate what we're thinking and feeling into coherent, structured sentences or into coherent ways. So that is key when it comes to both gratitude and also self-reflection. And the third and final thing I'd like to share with you today is emotion regulation systems. So we as humans have 3 systems to manage our emotions, but most of us only use 2 of those systems. So let me show you the 3 systems. Now there's a bit of detail here and I'm going to talk you through it. The first is our achieve system. Now this one is a motivational system and it drives us towards the things that we want or the things that we believe we need. And that can be both personal and professional. This system is associated with dopamine. Dopamine is a feeling of reward and pleasure. And when we are in this system, we are feeling things like feeling quite aspirational. We're in that pursuit of drive or goal direction. We're wanting, we're pursuing. The other system is survive. So this is our threat system. This is the system that's designed to alert us to danger or to threat. And that can be both perceived and, real or perceived threat or danger. This is where our fight or flight response occurs and it releases stress hormones, which are cortisol and adrenaline. When we're in this space or this system, we're experiencing anxiety, anger, things like concern or disgust or worry. Our third system is soothe, and that is when we're feeling safe, when we're feeling calm, when we're feeling peaceful or connected or protected or trusting or being trusted. What we need to do is actually switch between these systems to manage our emotions. They are designed to work together and to balance each other. We want to spend time in the achieve system. And sometimes when we are driving and we are achieving, we are naturally feeling things like anxiety. But we also want to use our soothe system to balance the way that these different systems work. And I'm not sure if it comes as a surprise to anyone, but we spend most of our time, so most people will spend most of their time in the achieve and the survive systems, which I think is critical to understand. So again, just with that piece of paper and pen, if you can just draw your 3 systems. So think about your 3 systems relative to each other. So where you spend your time. Are you in survive, achieve, or soothe? Now, what I've done is I've put my drawing on the screen. So my achieve system, my circle is bigger. I spend a lot of time in that motivational state, the achieving, the pursuing, the wanting, the goal direction. But I'd say that my survive system, I spend a lot of time there too. I think particularly living through a pandemic, not knowing what the future is holding at the moment, it's natural to feel anxiety. And I think with challenge and goal direction, it's also natural to feel anxiety. Completely normal. But my soothe system, I would say, is the smallest of the 3. So this can be at times quite a confronting exercise, but I think it's important to understand what your 3 systems are. Why knowing this is critical? I think this one's probably intuitive as well. But again, I ask the question, what is the impact at work and in life if we only use 2 of these 3 systems? And for most of us, the 2 systems that we're using are drive and survive. So first and foremost, what does that mean for our well-being? Are we missing the opportunity to manage and to engage with challenging but rewarding situations effectively? If we are spending a lot of time in drive or achieve, are we likely to burn out if we're not managing that or balancing that with our soothe system? Because drive releases dopamine and it can be quite pleasurable and rewarding, is there an opportunity or a risk that we might become addicted to that drive system? What does it mean if we are addicted to drive, or if we are experiencing or spending time in the threat system? Might that negatively impact our relationships and relationships with ourselves, but equally with other people? And potentially, what might it mean for our mental health? Might we experience more psychological distress if we're spending a lot of time in our survive system or a lot of time in our drive system without that balancing opportunity from our soothe system? So 3 strategies here for being mindly. The first is to build our emotional intelligence. So start being aware of and perceiving what we're feeling. Notice how our body is responding in certain situations and using that information and understanding all of that information that we're picking up on and perceiving to manage our emotions, and to manage our emotions for both our negative and our positive emotions. The second is to build our soothing system. I think we all know what brings us calm, what brings us peace, what makes us feel soothed, but it's really it's intentional activity that will really help our soothing system. So it's not about just using our soothing system when we are feeling stressed, so not using it reactively, but finding ways to use our soothing system every single day. And the third is to practice self-compassion. Now, this one's critical when we are spending a lot of time in that survive or that threat system, when we are feeling negative emotions, things like anxiety or anger or rage, or when we're just feeling flat. And the first is to be kind to yourself, to treat yourself the way you would treat a very close and dear friend. Appreciate that when we're in that system and when we're feeling negative emotions, that it is part of the human experience. It's a normal part of the human experience, and negative emotions are critical to a rich and full human existence. And accept emotions for what they are. They are information, they are data points, they are not right or wrong or good and bad, and they do not define you. So that was a very quick overview of 3 different concepts. Again, I could talk about this stuff for hours, but we had a look at ways of understanding the mind and why it's critical for work and life, and some strategies associated with each. And we covered naive realism, the negativity bias, and emotion regulation systems. So we imagine a world that is mindly. What that means is we imagine that each of us understands our mind and understands how it works, so we can have an impact on ourselves and also each other. And this is our brand new business. So it's myself and my co-founder, Emma. Both of us are psychologists, and we are curating tools and experiences for individuals so they really can understand the mind and then have a positive impact on themselves and on other people. It's been an absolute pleasure to be part of this conversation. I hope this content was useful. I encourage you to be mindly, and I welcome any questions. Reach out to me on email, and please do visit our website. But thank you, George and Rita, for the opportunity.
Kirsten, thank you so much. I've taken so many notes in that short presentation, and the one that really jumps out for me is the achieve, survive and soothe.
Yes.
And really looking at the ratios there. So
Yes.
I've got a question for you. You did the exercise for yourself. What do you do to make sure that you can balance out your 3 areas and making sure that you get enough soothe time in there?
It's a great question, George, and I think it's something that I struggle with each day. And for me, it's about putting time in my calendar, as silly as it might sound, but it's blocking out the time and knowing that I have that time and that space to engage my soothe system. I was a bit of a skeptic about gratitude, but for me, it's one of the most important things. So gratitude is something that I practice quite regularly, and exercise for me is critical, and being outdoors. So that time in my calendar is around practicing gratitude and equally moving my body and doing that outside.
And I love the simplicity of your message as well. It's not hard to work out exactly what you need to do. It's just putting it into action.
That's
so we
right.
really appreciate
Exactly.
the simplicity of the message, but also the impact of what you've shared with us as well. Kirsten, we've got, and thank you again, fantastic. And I think I'm going to re-watch this again just to be able to pick up on some of those points and what it means for me. We've got a customary process at the end of each of our Impactologist presentations where we ask one question and we play one game to finish off the presentation or chat. Are you ready for it?
I am ready.
Wonderful. Okay. You are on a video call with your 18-year-old self. What life advice would you provide young Kirsten?
That's a great question. Probably stop overanalyzing. Just go with it. Enjoy, and just continue being curious. Be curious about yourself, be curious about other people, and be curious about the world and the things that are happening around you.
And our second part of this is it's a word association.
Okay.
So we're going to share a word with you. You know the drill. You're the psychologist, and I'm explaining it to you.
This is a very revealing exercise.
Yes. Let me know what you think about yourself after this exercise. Yes. Okay. Family.
Love.
Holiday.
Oh, peace.
Happy.
Joy.
Mindly.
Passion.
Impact.
Inspiration.
Inspiration.
Absolutely. Oh, that's my
and
next
that was
word?
the word after, yeah.
Oh, leadership.
We have an Impactology first.
Yeah.
2020.
Oh, positive.
And 2021.
Even better.
Kirsten, thank you so much for making the time today. Rita and I will definitely be connecting with you post this event. And just for everyone that is joining here, your website again is?
www.mindly.co.
Wonderful. Thank you again, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you both. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Thanks.
That was great.
I took so many notes from that.
Yeah, that was really good. We've got now 3 minutes before our next presentation. We've got Mark Goody from Mary Outreach Support Service. So take a deep breather, go get yourself a coffee or a muffin. It is a Saturday.
It's a Saturday morning,
Yeah,
croissant, whatever
exactly.
your thing is.
And we'll see you in the next few minutes. Cheers.